Liam of Carcanne. Chapter 6. Southward. Part 2. The plaza at the center of town felt especially empty before dawn. The eateries and shops, the office buildings and suppliers, all lay dormant in the earliest hours of morning. Even the steady stream of travelers following the western branch had been dammed up for the night. Ox carts and wagons, secured against the dark, just waiting for the light of day to break them free and let them travel again. It had been hours since the lamps had received their final doses of oil, and now they strained to pull in what remained of their reserves before extinguishing for the approaching day. Their light flickered and fought to travel even a few feet beyond the dirty glass of their globes, allowing strange shadows to wash over town. Even with the earliest signs of light on the eastern horizon, the emerging city of Stossen felt orders of magnitude darker now than immediately following nightfall. It was now, under these conditions, that the adventurers of Carcanne started their days, slowly making their way to the hall from wherever they may be in the long hour before dawn. Liam stepped from the dim light of the lamps into the well-lit world of the adventurers' hall. The smell of dry oak timbers, mixed with the meats and breads of breakfast, assailed his nostrils before his eyes could adjust. Still on early morning autopilot, he wandered past the line of adventurers waiting to be released in the morning rush and set about collecting breakfast from the kitchen staff. As he sat down to eat his breakfast, the familiar rumble of uncounted adventurers rushing for the job boards reached his ears. He did nothing to hasten his arrival at the cork. He just sat, enjoying his free meal, as the tea and hot food did its best to wake him up. Not going to participate today? A voice now well known to him aided the food in its task. Huh? Liam turned to the source of the question to find Meryl standing at the foot of his table. She wore a simple dress of red linen with no arms and a skirt that ended just below her knees. A dark sash wrapped her waist. Liam was almost certain this was his first time seeing her out of uniform. You're not partaking in the rush this morning? Her head tilted to one side as she repeated the question. No. He looked past her to the commotion at the board and shook his head. The jobs on the iron board rarely seem to be worth it. I suppose that explains why there's not many irons who take part in the chaos, she agreed, glancing over her shoulder to watch for a moment. You look different, Liam felt himself say, and immediately groaned internally. It was too early in the morning to let his mouth run unchecked. He took a drink of his tea in hopes of further waking his tongue up and drowning anything else cringeworthy before it escaped. Yes, I do. Meryl returned her attention to Liam. I don't work till this afternoon, so no uniform. She grabbed the edges of the skirt and pulled them out to the sides to show off her dress. It looks nice, he complimented her after setting his tea down. Thanks. She dropped the skirt. It's a nice change from the uniform, but I didn't come over here to show it off. I saw you sitting here and thought I'd come give you some good news. Good news? Liam perked up a little. Things hadn't exactly been going bad for him lately, but he could still stand to have as many pick-me-ups as possible. Yep, good news. She rounded the corner of the table and rested her hip against it, just like she would when the two talked across the counter. Liam wondered if he should take it personally, that she seemed to feel more comfortable with the barrier between them. You've been staying at the Maiden's Church, right? Yeah, Liam nodded. In the woodshed. In the woodshed? Her features briefly flooded over with mild surprise, before her customer service face reappeared. Well, then this will be very good news. You qualify to rent a room in the hall now. I do? Liam hadn't been aware renting a room was something he had to qualify for. Yes, you do. Meryl's face fell. She had been expecting a bigger reaction to her update. That's great. He tried to recover, to sound excited and meet her expectations, but it just rang hollow. I don't think I can afford it right now, but it's good to know. I've noticed you don't tend to take a lot of your earnings out in coin, so I checked your balance for you. Liam could see Meryl's eyes move to the ceiling as the desk clerk concentrated on the math in her head. You've got plenty in there to cover you for probably close to a month. Huh, he grunted thoughtfully. Yep, she nodded. There's a few long-term rentals open right now, but if you want one, you'll need to act fast. They're that popular, huh? Well, all halls have to keep a certain number of rooms open for traveling members, and with all of the traveling traffic from the Cardinal Road, our space for long-term stays is kind of small, she said before glancing over her shoulder to the clerk's counter. I'll give it some thought. Well, don't think about it too long. Meryl pulled herself away from the table. You don't want to miss out. I won't. I've got to run back behind the desk to talk to Toft about something. I'll see you this afternoon? Meryl asked, taking a half step from the table. I would think so. All right, see you then. Meryl turned to head for the counter. Something else to think over, Liam grumbled in his head as he dug back into his breakfast. Rank, Iron. Job type, Escort. Employer, Private Merchant. Task, escort a merchant train of 2 wagons into northern Brodeman. Journey will include stops in several towns and villages crisscrossing the dukedom. Job will end when wagons reach Vorstgrunveld. Contract does not cover return to Hall. Departure, June 4th. Duration, 5 to 7 weeks. Pay, see clerk. Liam spent a long time in front of the iron board staring at the job card. It wasn't the first escort mission he had seen on the cork panel, nor was it the first job offered that would take him out of town. It was, however, the first job that could provide a little bit of the adversity that Kieron had recommended, while letting him see more of Carcanne after the two's long talk the day before. The gold rank's words had weighed heavily on his mind all through the night. They were with him at dinner, when he lay down to sleep, and they had been the fuzzy early morning ponderings that Merrill had interrupted during breakfast. The courier jobs supplied by the guild had been a good starting point, but Kieron thought he was ready for bigger. Liam couldn't be sure if he felt Kieron was wrong, or he was just afraid to leave the relative safety in Stossen. All of his jobs thus far had left him to return to his bed at night. They allowed him to sleep safely in the walls of the church, hidden away from the dangers of the world, from the wolf that had hunted his thoughts his first night in town. Was he ready to face that again? What would he do if the wolf in his mind caught up to him when there was no statue of the goddess to scare it away? Liam reached up and snatched the job card from the board. I have plenty of clothes now, as well as the pack from Otto and the bedrolls from Denholm, Liam thought as he waited in line for the next available clerk. The clerk should be able to tell me if I'll need a horse. I can always rent one from the guild. The card says the wagons leave on the 4th, which would give me 2 days to prepare. Otto and Nori should be able to tell me what else I'll need to take with me. Liam's thoughts continued to run quickly through lists of things he might want to take with him. He'd have the clerk at the window check his account balance. Merrill might know the amount, but he didn't. Since there was no point in renting that room now, he could use the money on supplies and other kit he might need. He'd need to see an armorer for a proper chest plate, as well as other equipment. Was 2 days going to be long enough to gather everything? Surely the guild would have some resources he could utilize to speed the procurement process up. He stepped forward in line, his mind still running through lists of things he needed to bring and situations he might encounter. Were there bandits in the plains to the north? Would it be mostly goblins or other monsters he'd have to worry about? He hadn't seen one aside from the Vargr before. What were they like? Suddenly, as his mind continued to churn, Liam felt his hand painfully grasped and the job card rent from his fingers. Pulled from his daydreams of long days in the saddle, he turned to face the interruption and found himself staring at an annoyed-looking Otto. The silver rank was reading over the card and shaking his head with a scowl on his face. Wordlessly, he turned away from Liam and stalked back to the iron board. It took Liam a second to process all of this and give chase to his friend. He arrived back at the corkboard just in time to watch Otto pin the card back in place. "What the hell?" he demanded as he caught up alongside Otto. "You can't do that one." Otto tapped the card. "It'll take you out of town for over a month." "I know that. It says so on the card." Liam found his voice rising and stopped to glance around the room. The sudden action taken by the senior adventurer and the energetic response from his junior didn't look to have drawn any interest. "That's too long." Otto turned from the board and walked out into the room. Too long for what? Liam again found himself following after Otto as he walked. Liam was starting to feel like a puppy who, like in the cartoons of his childhood, kept leaping and barking at a bigger dog who wouldn't pay attention to him. He hated the feeling, and again scanned the room for onlookers. "We'll be long gone by the time you get back," Otto informed Liam as they reached a pair of chairs in the middle of the room. He motioned for Liam to take a seat. "Long gone?" Liam looked confused as he slowly took the seat offered. "Why? Where are you going?" "Nori and I just leased out," Otto said, taking the other chair for himself. "Leased out?" "We signed an ongoing contract," he explained. "Nori, Kieron, and I will be leaving for Royce Castle in about a week." "How long will you be gone?" "Till after the end of summer. We got a really good deal to protect some high-end goods in and out of Royce Castle for the season. A really good deal, well above our usual pay grade." Otto leaned forward in his chair and glanced around as he spoke. Liam could see some of the same caution in Otto that Court had tried to talk into Sidsel. It must have been a big contract. Liam's heart sank in his chest. He had known that Otto and Nori would move on to other jobs eventually. They couldn't spend the rest of their careers mentoring him. Kieron had already gone and come back on one job in the time they had been spending on him. But that was the thing. Kieron had left, but Otto and Nori had stayed. He had kind of pictured the same thing happening with the other two. It was selfish of him to assume they would just take turns living their lives in order to raise him up the ranks, but he had a hard time picturing the hall without at least one of his 3 mentors in it. The hypocrisy of that assumption, when paired with the actions he had been on the cusp of taking, hit him like a ton of bricks. "We would have brought you along on this job," Otto continued, "but as it is, we're riding in Kieron's wagon. He convinced the contract holder to take on 2 silvers instead of the 2nd gold that he had requested. There was no way he was going to get them to take an iron as well." "I appreciate the faith," Liam replied half-heartedly. "With us there, you could have handled it just fine." Otto could tell his pupil didn't believe him. "There was nothing wrong with you taking the job I put back. You're physically ready for it, and the plains around Vorskrenveld aren't exactly rough and tumble. It would be good experience." "Then why stop me from taking it? So we can hang out for a week before you guys leave?" Liam asked the question sarcastically, but deep down he hoped for what he had said. The 3 adventurers had become his closest friends in this world. Being without them was going to be rough. Any time he could have with them to train or just hang out would be worth postponing his first big adventure. Not quite. Otto reached into the pocket sewn to the inside of his vest and produced a folded piece of paper. Handing it over to Liam, he could just make out the guild sigil at the top of the parchment written in silver ink. "Nori and I signed on for this job just before Kieron came to us about the gig in Royce Castle. The paper wasn't your typical job card. It was one of the long-form contracts the guild put in place to protect individuals signing on with a party." Liam read it over quickly to bring himself up to speed. A seasonal logging community in Genwevel returned after the last snows melted from their camp to find some of the permanent structures destroyed. As they had set about rebuilding the structures, several of the men were attacked when alone in the woods, more of their property destroyed, and several horses killed and dragged off into the forest. No one had seen the monsters responsible, but there were signs of hobgoblin activity in the area. Liam read past the description of the job to search out and destroy the hobgoblin band, and on into the contract section of the paperwork. The gains from the contract were to be divided between Otto and Nori equally, as was appropriate of their partnership. Towards the bottom of the page, written in fresh ink, was an amendment to the contract. The addendum provided for the addition of a 3rd adventurer of lower rank to join the party and receive equal pay, a fair 3-way split. "How about it?" Otto asked as Liam looked up from the paper. "I know it's not a long, leisurely trip through the plains, but it'll be a hell of a first adventure." Denholm puttered nervously around Liam as the 2 waited at the front gate to the church. The priest had agreed to wake early and open the chapel for Otto and Nori to say prayers for safe travels on their journey. While the 2 waited for the others to arrive, Denholm had confirmed with Liam close to a dozen times that he had everything he was going to need for the job ahead, and that he was, in fact, mentally and physically prepared. Liam was starting to think the only reason Denholm hadn't tied him down to prevent him from going was because he would be with Otto and Nori. The 48 hours since Liam had agreed to go with his mentors on this job had been a whirlwind of activity for him. After agreeing, Otto set out several tasks Liam needed to complete quickly if they were going to complete this job on time for him and Nori to make it to Royce Castle and meet up with Kieron. The first of which was to secure food for himself for up to a week of traveling. It would take them close to 2 days to reach the camp, and according to Nori there would be meals provided once there, but Otto insisted it was always good to carry extra. You never knew when you may lose a horse and have to walk back to civilization. As he had hoped in his mental preparations for the card Otto had stolen, it turned out the hall would have some of the things he needed. It was in asking around the guild hall where he could acquire food for his trip that he would discover just how prepared the guild was for aiding adventurers in their travels. Immediately, upon asking a clerk where to go, he was led to the kitchens to meet with Lee. Speaking with her, he was able to procure dried meats, fruits, and bannock bread for the trip. Lee not only made arrangements for him to purchase the goods, which she and her cooks made and kept in stock, but guaranteed they would be packaged appropriately and ready for him to pick up the morning of his departure. It was Lee who then pointed Liam to the stables so he could rent a horse. It was the stablemaster who, after arranging for horse and saddle, sent him on to the guild-recommended armorer in Stossen. Once there, he purchased the protective gear he would require to safely hunt hobgoblins. Round and round, from location to location, Liam was sent one after another to purchase, rent, and receive the items he would need to take with him on his first adventure. He had been cautious of overspending. Even with the rather hefty guild discounts, it would have been easy to get carried away and drain his account in just one afternoon. Liam made sure to spend thrifty and buy used whenever it was practical. The collection of gear he had purchased, mostly from lists recommended by his team of mentors, now sat inside the chapel awaiting the arrival of his friends. "Here they come," Denholm announced to Liam from where his pacing had taken him outside of the gate. Moving to join him, Liam spotted the two men on heavily laden horseback, with the third unmanned horse being led by a rope behind them. "Good morning," Norrie greeted them as he dismounted his horse. "Morning," Liam returned as he took the reins of the third horse from Otto. "Thanks for picking her up for me." He immediately rubbed the nose of the friendly animal. "No problem," Otto said as he joined the others on the ground. "There was a package from Lee left with her as well. We put it in the saddlebags." "Great." Liam scratched his horse's chin as he looked back to where the food he had purchased had already been secured for him. The urge to check the bag's contents crossed his mind, but he thought better of it. Double-checking Lee already felt like sacrilege. "Sorry we're late," Norrie added as he tied his horse off to one of several metal rings set into the wall. Otto had some concerns he needed to address with the stablemaster. "Is everything all right?" Denholm asked. "You'd have to ask him." Norrie jerked a thumb towards where his partner was lashing his own horse to a ring. "Was something wrong?" Liam asked as he did his best to imitate the knots the other two were using to secure their mounts. "I was just a little concerned about the horse he was letting you." "What's wrong with it?" Liam looked up and down the length of the brown horse he had been leased by the stable, completely at a loss on what could be wrong with it. "It's just kind of old," Otto said, stopping in front of the gate and taking another look over the horse. "He's worried it won't be able to keep up with our new horses." Norrie motioned to the two younger animals the Silver Ranks had purchased for their upcoming contract. "I'm sure he'll be fine." Liam defended his mount while rubbing the spot between its eyes. "She," Norrie corrected. "I'm sure she'll be fine," Liam repeated. "I hope so," Otto agreed, "because he wouldn't change his mind. He was dead set on you taking that old mare." "I'm sure it is all as the goddess intends it to be." Denholm patted Otto on the shoulder reassuringly before turning back into the gardens. "I'm sure you're right." Otto relented and followed the priest towards the chapel, the other two members of the party close on their heels. Liam of Carcanne was written by Will Hansen. This chapter has been read for you by the author. If you've enjoyed this episode, why not leave a comment? I'd love to hear what you think. Likewise, every like, rating, and subscription helps. Liam of Carcanne is now available as a podcast on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and all other major podcast distributors. Want more information on Liam or Will? Visit the Wooks Books YouTube channel, Facebook page, or website, all linked in the description. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next time.